is the most elite quarterback in the country Baton Rouge bound?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, you can also find us on YouTube as well. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. Follow along for podcast updates at Locked On LSU. And joining Locked On LSU now is the Locked On Network's official recruiting insider, Brian Smith. Brian, welcome to the network. Welcome to Locked On LSU. Appreciate your time and appreciate your insight because you've got a whole lot of it about a certain player that LSU fans are going to learn a whole lot of over the next coming years, and that's 2024 quarterback commit Colin Hurley. Now, you said you've known Colin Hurley for quite some time now. What exactly is LSU getting in their 2024 quarterback?
Somebody that lives and breathes football, first and foremost. He's been doing it since he was about 10. He's been homeschooled. He trains during the day, both academically and athletically at 6 Points. It's a facility that trains quarterbacks and Major League Baseball pitchers, etc. And it is elite. And like one day he sent me a video of him pushing a sled with like 1,000 pounds of weight. And to get all the weight on there, he had a Major League Baseball pitcher from the Yankees sitting on it. It was pretty funny. So he's very determined, and he's a kid that is pinpoint with every single detail that he does. And that's why he's got like 40, 50 offers. So LSU got a great player because Colin could have went to any school he wanted, and he chose to go down to the Bayou.
And that's exactly one thing that I wanted to look at because he could, to your point, could have gone anywhere he wanted to go. Chose LSU over USC, over Alabama, over so many teams that have these quote-unquote quarterback guru coaches or teams that may have maybe a clearer path to a national title. What was it about LSU, about Brian Kelly and this coaching staff that he could have chosen to go anywhere? Why LSU?
The competition, because I asked the same question of him, his dad, play the SEC West. There was a chance for him to play earlier, maybe at somewhere else. I mean, it's like you said, it's not like they're avoiding talent or anything at quarterback there. They've got plenty of it. Right. But he wanted to come in and compete. And he also wanted to come in and learn from other players. He's okay if he doesn't play right away because Colin skipped a year. He moved up in class. Right. So he's going to enroll as a very young player. And he's cool with redshirting and sitting out his freshman year. He gets it. But he's not afraid of competition either. He wants to go against the best. He's done it on the 7-on-7 circuit at the high school level here in Florida. He's ready to compete, and he wants to win on every single play.
And I'm glad that you say that because there's Brian Kelly's philosophy of recruiting is that he wants to get a quarterback in every single class. And part of me says, well, yeah, that's what you would want to do. You want to continuously replenish the quarterback talent in that room. You want to continuously bring in top quarterback talent. It's the most important position in sports for a reason. But the double-edged sword of that is you continue to collect talent, especially at that position. It is so easy for these players to transfer. If it looks like a little bit of a crowded room, it's so easy for them to say, okay, well, I have a more automatic, path to starting wherever else that might be, whether in the SEC or not. So that is a little bit encouraging to hear that, Colin Hurley will be coming into a pretty stacked quarterback room. He may be a few years away from starting or at least having, the path to starting, but it sounds like he's open to that and he's wanting to compete.
That is exactly right. He doesn't want it to be handed to him. If he did, he wouldn't have chose anything in the LSU's realm of the SEC West. Mm-hmm. There's no easy pass over there. So right. I'm good with that because that's what I'd been told about him before I ever met him. He's a kid that doesn't really care about that. He's just going to do his own thing. That's how he's always done it. And again, when you start training when you're like 10, you're a little different. He's 220 pounds now. When I first met him, he was around 195 or something a couple years ago. And he looked like he was a little older, but now he was like a just flat out grown man. And he's ready to ball. So again, I think he's getting ready to turn 17, but he looks like he's 25 in terms of like his physique. So he's ready.
wise and physically stronger beyond his years, and it sounds like he has mentally a good grasp on what he's
Yes.
getting into the college game. He understands the expectations, he understands the work that he needs to put on behind the scenes, but on the field, what does he do best?
Finding the hole and finding a way to get the ball down the field. One of the best passes I've ever seen at the high school level, he made when he was a freshman. They were playing Columbia High School in Lake City, which is, if you're from Florida, you would know the program. And they were running a zone, and there was really no hole there. And I'm standing in the back of the end zone, and the ball's coming right at me. And there was only one guy on his team around it, and there's three defenders, but it came right to. It was one of the greatest passes I've ever seen. He made it when he was like 14 years old, and that just kind of told me, this isn't a normal kid, because most guys wouldn't even try to make the pass, let alone throw a dime.
Right.
And he understands coverages and other things that a lot of other guys at the high school level do not. And he's also under the tutelage of a phenomenal coach here in the state of Florida, as a Hall of Famer. So he picked a school that kind of fit what he wanted to do and what he wanted to learn. And he's not just the arm talent. He can throw a football about 60 miles an hour. He can gun it, but you got to be able to win above the shoulders, as you well know. And he's able to do that too. So being in the SEC West, you need a little bit of everything to survive week to week, as you well know. And Colin Hurley will bring that to the Tigers.
It's the most difficult division in the most difficult conference in college sports, and that's for a reason. And I think that a lot of LSU fans have learned, looking at the kind of the quarterback competition between Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier, it's not just about having the arm and the accuracy to get the ball in difficult places. It's about having the willingness to throw those balls in tight spaces. He has had an invite. Colin Hurley has had an invite to the Elite 11 finals. Just a little bit of a background to everyone that's listening. What does that mean, and what has Elite 11 seen in Colin Hurley so far?
Elite 11 is the top notch of all the recruiting camps and combines. I just got back from the one in Atlanta.
Welcome back.
It's the bottom line for quarterbacks. The kids that don't get invited are crushed. Just to go to the regionals and all, that's one thing, but there's only 20 kids that get to go out to LA. They all compete. We knew a couple of years ago Colin was going to be that guy because he competes at a high level and he has the physical skills. But it is 3 hours nonstop mental and physical grueling tests and throwing accuracy, what you do here, what you do there, and they grade every single thing you do. It is like being at an NFL training camp, but for high school kids. And there's guys that played in the NFL coaching them up, and that's just not something you can get in a lot of places. And they travel all around the country. For Hurley to get invited to the finals means he's flat out an elite football player. It's just more signification of what he already was. And people in the industry, people down here already knew. We knew when Colin was in 8th grade, okay, this is a little different. But to see it mature in the way that it did, above the shoulder especially, was the steps that it made it just almost kind of funny. I didn't even worry about him getting invited. He went to the one in Mississippi. I knew he was going to get. I didn't care. There was no way he wasn't going to get invited because he already proved it. But now he's got to. I wouldn't be shocked if he won it. That's the other thing. This, if you win Elite 11, you're pretty much a top 10 player national. He's got a chance to do that.
And looking at some of the NFL quarterbacks that have been to Elite 11, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So definitely encouraging. And we'll absolutely be checking out Colin Hurley at the Elite 11 over the summer. But I want to get into some other targets in the 2024 class. What are some names, some position groups, and some recruits that LSU is targeting as the 2024 recruiting cycle goes underway? We'll get into that with Brian coming up next. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar, you don't want all the calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built Bar. You have got to try this, because if you're like me and you want to make better decisions, you want to be healthier, you want to make more conscious snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then I've got the perfect thing for you. It is Built Bars and Built Puffs. They're healthy and they taste amazing. What makes Built Bars so good is, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. And I'm not quite sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. I mean, they're healthy. They're only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, with a whopping 17 grams of protein, so you'll be full for hours. Now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been telling you about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, which of course you can still get your specialty flavors at Built.com. But you can also go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. You can head to your Walmart, well, your nearest Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Or if you're closer to a Sam's Club, then run in there, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. So delicious, good for you. You can thank me later. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On's recruiting insider Brian Smith joins us. I have 3 names that I've been looking at, that I've been focusing on. Some names, some players that LSU has been targeting, some big time names, and it's not just LSU that's looking at these guys. I mean, it is pretty much every single program in the country. First and foremost, looking at Colin Simmons, one of the highest rated players that has yet to commit to where he will play college ball, a 5-star edge rusher out of Duncanville, Texas. What makes this guy so special?
He can play the run and he can play the pass. He's not just a guy that gets up the field and tries to sack the quarterback. Colin is a kid that plays in what we call the Metroplex in Dallas, and every week you're going against real guys. And he's somebody that we knew about when he's freshman, sophomore, all the guys that kind of come up early. He was a kid that was big and was athletic, but he's also played against that competition and proven it. And that's why LSU, Alabama, pretty much anybody you can imagine, SEC, Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, Ohio State, they've all come after him. He can play on the inside if you wanted him to, or he could play on the outside depending on the situation. But I think he's going to be a powerful, strong side end that more than likely ends up being a guy that on third down the other team has to scheme against. That's why he's important. LSU has an incredible history, as you well know, of putting defensive linemen in the NFL. This is the kind of guy that they won with. And I don't think there's going to be any doubt that if LSU gets him, he can continue that tradition. He's been to LSU a few times. I don't want to predict where he's going to go. I know a lot of people like to do that. At this stage, I'll stay away from that. But I know from what I've been told, LSU's in that top group, top 2 or 3 schools. This, I would imagine, will end up being a signing day decision.
And I'm sure there's the list of offers goes on and on and on. And I think that one advantage that LSU has is just where they are geographically. I mean, they're
100%.
smack dab in the center of some of the most rich recruiting areas. I mean, South Louisiana being one of them, Texas, Florida, Alabama, they're all just a hop and a skip and just a couple hour drive away from LSU. What kind of priorities is Colin Simmons placing on his recruitment? Is it location, being close to home, getting to the NFL, of course, is going to be up there, winning a national championship, playing for a certain coach? What do you think his priorities are?
Relationship. Almost every kid I talk to, it's the same thing. I was just out of high school here in Miami, where I'm at today. I was scouting before I came on the podcast, and I was talking to a big defensive lineman, and I said, well, what are you looking for? You can go wherever. And he said, well, it's about the defensive line coach for me and just kind of building a relationship. Almost every kid I talk to, it's the same because all these schools have phenomenal facilities now. The stadium, like Tiger Stadium's unbelievable, but a lot of stadiums are that way. So it's the competition and the coaching staff relationship. And he has every head coach in America calling him. I don't know how you figure that out, whether it's Colin or somebody else, but I guess it's a good problem to have if you can, on any given day, pick up the phone and call Alabama, Texas, LSU, and decide to go to that school.
I had a hard enough time making my college decision. I wasn't even a 5-star football player. I can't even imagine what these 16, 17-year-old kids are going through. When it comes to these 4-star, 5-star players that are being recruited by seemingly every single program in the country, where everything is handed to them on a silver platter when they come into those recruiting visits, and they are getting wined and dined, and they have the world at their fingertips. How much does NIL play a factor? Not specifically for one player, but just overall for some of these very, very highly touted and very highly recruited young high school players?
It can be huge. It depends on the financial situation of the family. It depends on the position, what the kid thinks he's worth compared to somebody else. If one of their buddies just got to deal with somebody that can influence it, it is really case by case. There's, depending on who you believe, I've heard as much as $10 million for players over a long term. I'll let you guess on which guy that was last year based on his hype and all that. But it just depends. And some kids, they won't sign. I know of a kid that committed recently to a prominent program. Then the dad said, well, we want some of this. And they're like, no. And now he's not going to go there. Never even made it to the public, but he has 40 offers too. So it changes everything. And it's just random. You don't know when they're going to ask or anything else, because even if they don't talk about it up front, they may change their mind. So it is wild, and that's why I hate predictions now. I used to make a lot of them early. I don't mess with it anymore.
Yeah,
it's almost impossible.
It's so true. And to your point, it's different on a case-to-case basis. For somebody, for one kid, it could be, I want to go to the NFL and I want to make as much money as possible in college football. For another player, it could be, hey, I just want to go to the best place for me. NIL will come. And it is totally varies on a case-to-case basis, and especially when you're dealing with 15, 16, 17-year-old kids.
Oh, absolutely.
And kind of looking at a player and is already committed to LSU. You mentioned, Colin Simmons being a defensive lineman. I mean, LSU has just been a factory for defensive players, specifically defensive linemen. But there's another position group that really LSU hasn't been a factory for, but it's looking like it's trending that way, especially under the Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock offense. And that is Trey Des Green, the tight end out of East Feliciana, a local Louisiana kid.
Sure.
What is LSU getting in Trey Des Green at a position that really, if you go back 5-10 years, LSU hasn't placed a whole lot of priority on it. But Brian Kelly being the tight end developing machine that he is, this tight end room is going to be pretty packed, it looks like, over the next few years.
He's going to take kids that can do both. And what I mean by that is they can flex out and they can play power football. He did that when he was at Cincinnati. He did that when he was at Notre Dame. Why would it be any different down on the Bayou? Right. They're getting an athlete with him, first off. But they need guys, and again, we're in the SEC West. No matter how many defensive players you have, you better score, or you're not going to win. All these quarterbacks now, the SECs just went crazy with it. I think that they're going to try to find ways to score, even with the tight end, and maybe do it a little differently than what some of the 2019 LSU offense will never be seen again. Arguably, that's as efficient an offense I think I've ever seen in any sport.
It was special.
It was a lot of fun. I'm not an LSU fan, but I was watching. It was just fun to watch. They're going to be able to power it in a little bit more. They're going to be able to hit the tight end, play action, do some things. It's more traditional. As you said, Kelly did that in his previous stops. It's not going to change. And here's the other thing. That's a program that's just right down the road from Baton Rouge. You have to hit that. I don't think they did a great job of that in the last 5 years. They ventured out a little too much. Per capita, Louisiana is the best state in the country, in my opinion. I've scouted there many times. It's unbelievable. Just take the kids that are there. They don't sign 12 kids a year out of Louisiana. They fail, in my opinion. I think they overlooked that a little bit with Ed's staff. Mm-hmm. I think Brian Kelly's making a smart move. And they've done a little bit better job overall, just recruiting the entire state. From what I've been told, I got a couple buddies that scout the state, and I think that's going to help. East Feliciana, and in particular, is just a great example of that. Anything with an hour radius or so of Baton Rouge, you cannot lose those kids to Alabama, to Texas A&M, et cetera. And they've lost too many kids in the last 5 years.
And it really was refreshing to hear Brian Kelly say that was one of his biggest recruiting priorities, was keeping in-state talent in-state. But of course, it's easier said than done. And that was one of the biggest critiques of Brian Kelly coming into LSU is this guy from Boston who's coached a majority of his career in the Midwest, is he going to be able to recruit in South Louisiana? Is he going to be able to kind of fit into the culture in South Louisiana? And it sounds like, at least from the small sample size that we have and from your experience being so dialed into the recruiting world, it really hasn't come to fruition. Some of the fears we had haven't come to fruition.
From what I've been told, is he knows he's not going to just completely fit in the culture, but he hired the guys to do it. Frank Wilson, just as an example, I'm sure you hear his name constantly. He's been a part of the recruiting scene forever. And Frank's somebody that everybody gets along with. He's going to get in-state kids, and he's going to get some kids from Mississippi, Tennessee, whatever. As long as they have guys like that on staff and Kelly can just be the closer, they're fine. Think about this. How hard is it to sell Death Valley for an official visit on a Saturday night? If you're really selling to a kid at that point, he shouldn't go there. That's just my opinion. He shouldn't go there. There's certain things that are just not that hard. So the local kids, for the most part, want to go to LSU. They grow up rooting for the Tigers. Don't fix it if it's not broke. LSU made its living on this for 100 years. It hasn't changed. Just, if you get a quarterback somewhere or a kicker or whatever, that's fine. But 90% of your players, it's right there, man. You don't have to go very far at all.
And 90% of them are right there, and they want to come there for
That's
the most
that's
part.
what I mean. It's not that hard. It's not
Right.
that hard.
We focus a lot on the future, rightfully so, but let's focus on the here and now. Some players in the transfer portal that LSU has been targeting. We'll get into that with Brian coming up next. Transfer portal. There is one, as we were talking about some in-state recruiting, about players that just make too much sense to recruit, that is just horrible to lose out on because they make too much sense to fit into your program. One of those players that is currently in the transfer portal is Logan Diggs. Transfer from Notre Dame, running back. He's from Louisiana. I mean, it makes way too much sense. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He was recruited by Brian Kelly. He was coached by Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. Louisiana is home. He took his official visit to LSU over the weekend. What is the latest that you've heard on Logan Diggs?
South Carolina and LSU are probably the same thing that you have. And I haven't heard anything the last few days, but the reason he left Notre Dame is they've got an elite guy that he was competing with, and he wasn't going to be the guy. He wants to leave after this year, go to the NFL is what I'd heard. Is he ready for that? If he can stay healthy, yeah. He's a tremendous out of the backfield receiver. He's a big kid. He runs hard. I went down to see him play his senior year at Rummel. He's a kid that can tote the football 25 times for you. He's an every down traditional tailback that can play the SEC West. I don't know what he's looking for if he's trying to be just the guy. LSU doesn't fit that, in my opinion. That's why the South Carolina thing was curious with me. So I don't know where his head's at. If it's just I want to win, I would go to LSU, but South Carolina's not on the same playing field. So I'm very curious to see what Logan does.
It two totally different programs. One in competitiveness, but also South Carolina needs running backs. LSU's got a pretty stacked running back room, assuming that the 3 backs they didn't have in spring are able to come back with injury and with grades. So it is interesting to me because if I'm Logan Diggs, I'm looking at LSU and saying, hey, if I can't get playing time right away, then I don't want to come there. But
it's home.
It just makes so much sense.
It's home. Yeah.
It's home.
He grew up 2 hours from their campus. So, and all the kids and stuff around New Orleans, for the most part, where do they want to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if he wants playing time. The much easier path is in the state of South Carolina. That's up to him.
One position group that LSU throughout spring has really shown that LSU needs to add depth. They have solid starting pieces, but they just need bodies, is on the offensive line. Who are you looking at in the transfer portal who has yet to, pledge their allegiance to their next playing place? Looking at in the transfer portal, because just from my research, it doesn't look too deep.
I'll just give you the easy overview on this. I was on the recruiting trail the other day, and 2 SEC coaches that are rivals of LSU were in the same room with me, and we were talking recruiting. There's not much there because it's the longest position on the quarterback to develop. So people strongly prefer portal kids over high school kids because it's the immediate way to win. And, of course, as you know, fan base LSU in particular, they're not real patient with losing. So these coaches want to keep their jobs. There wasn't anybody that either one of them mentioned to me that was like, okay, this is the dude. Mm-hmm. There's some good players, but I don't have a specific name. That's how bad it is. But most of the elite tackles, especially, they don't have to go in. They just go to the draft. I don't know. This is an example. A kid Notre Dame they needed a safety. They just took a kid out of FCS. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be some kid. I have no idea who he is. It was a 0-star out of New Orleans that grew 6 inches after he got into college. LSU and everybody else, if they haven't found a guy yet, it's not a good sign. There could be somebody, but I am unaware of it.
I'm kind of holding out the same kind of hope that there's somebody who's just going to blossom, or just keep my fingers crossed and hope that all of the starting linemen stay healthy throughout the season. But as we know, hope is not a strategy.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing. Several coaches have told me that. And then this past week when I was talking to those guys, I'm like, that's not a good sign. It's a down year for offensive linemen, apparently. And LSU, that was their spot. The last couple of years they're like, if they have any injuries, I mean, you can't keep Daniels upright. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how good he can throw a football. So it's unfortunate, but it's 5 guys up front. If you don't have 5 healthy ones, it is really hard to win in the SEC West.
Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider. Where can the people find more of your work?
Mostly on Twitter, but my handle is the same on everything I do, Instagram, and the same with basically YouTube or anything. FB Scout _ Florida. That's FB Scout _ Florida. I love to talk recruiting across the country, and I live in Florida. Right now, I'm down in the Miami area doing some scouting, all the spring games and everything. I'm going to be at IMG. Several kids at LSU is offered there. I'm going to be there for their spring game on Wednesday night. So I look forward to being back. Hopefully, Caroline has me back. Talk a little more LSU. I need to have you give me some tickets to go to an LSU game. Never been to one. So,
Oh, you're missing out. I will
I just never have.
absolutely do that. It is
So,
the I'm biased, but I think it's the greatest place in the world.
yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I love the food. It's my favorite place on earth to get a meal. Southern Louisiana. No
Oh, it's the
question.
best food. I miss it dearly.
Yes.
Brian, thank you so much. We'll have you back on the podcast soon to talk what you've been seeing at IMG.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, we will chat with Pro Football Focus because they've got some pretty good news that I think you're going to be really excited about. They're very high on a guy that we know very well. We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.